我觉得看把这个应该去帮你播干嘛？那听一下把这个。How's it sound?
Pull up, yeah, pull up yours.
Good? Awesome.
I do think it is actively recording, which is nice.
Should we do any like sound tests, anything like that?
Good. It is working there and then it is recording here, which is nice. What if I can share screen so we can just do it through here? Nice. And then we just need to connect.
Oh wow, fancy. Hey, you got everything set up,
How do you
man.
connect? That's
I've already connected.
Oh, sick. Awesome.
Is
Here.
it the slideshow mode and
Sure.
try hitting the next one to make sure that it works?
Let's see. Is that gonna work?
Yep, here we go.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect.
Lovely. All right.
All right, I know I'm starting late, but we'll pick up the pace and jump right in.
And then if you guys want to, you guys can come around. That'd be good.
Yeah, feel free.
Around here. We're all friends, all buddies. Come hither, come hither.
Yes, might as well see.
All right. Hey everyone, I'm Joshua Mallard. I'm a composer for video games, of course, doing a lot of things in classical music and film as well. These are a few games I've worked on, and thankfully it keeps growing. So I'm here to just tell you about my experience working in audio, but also game development. So I'm hoping to take you on a trip through my game dev journey through the lens of a composer and a sound designer. So here's how I got started. You know, when we think of composers, we think of people like Beethoven, someone who's writing pen and paper, you know, very sort of a prestigious sort of aesthetic to it. But nowadays, there's a lot of people hopping onto online software, getting an FL Studio, getting a Reaper, getting a Pro Tools, and making music. That is kind of how I started. And I like to say that people around our age group who are pretty young are part of a creative generation. I mean, you can go on TikTok right now and find people who have never ever taken a music class making music. You got people like Nick Mira, who produced for Juice World, making platinum albums off of a laptop with Apple earbuds. This is something that I think is really unique about the younger generation of music makers, but also game developers too. Now you have people downloading Unity, Unreal, Godot, any sort of game engine that you can grab onto and just making stuff. I'll tell you a little bit about sort of the common pieces of advice you'll hear in any sort of like freelance or business sort of facing thing. Things like put yourself out there, build positive relationships, do good work and get referred for your work. These are all things you'll hear people say pretty much ad nauseum about how you should get started doing X, Y, and Z. Well, this is pretty much what I did when I was in university trying to get into game development and music making. I did things like game jams, like not GDC. This was the first game jam, and I actually saw that something from the Valley Game Jam was put up here. So hey, you got a role model to look at. I thought game jams were really fun, also kind of stressful. You know, you have a very short amount of time to put a game together with a group of people you might not know at all. I was also uploading a lot of terrible music to SoundCloud. That's what it was like back then, just uploading stuff online, making music. Yeah. You'll hear some stuff though, nothing from this day and age, from that day and age. Um, but you know, my SoundCloud hasn't been updated in a while, so you might find some oldies on them. Also, Discord, you know, Discord really came from gaming culture. It's huge for game development. I'd say maybe 80% of the games I work on are through a Discord server, the rest through Slack. Slack is much worse, but that's kind of how we got into it. Here's actually a picture of the first gig I got. I was in the Game Dev League Discord. This is a public Discord server that I found online, and now you can join today. I saw my friend there, Max, posting something saying, hey, we're looking for a sound designer, composer, someone who can do audio for our game. And I shot my shot. I said, hey, check this out. Here's my SoundCloud, things like that. And even though I was nowhere near professional, I only had a SoundCloud, things like that. I had something that I could at least share and say, hey, check this out. I'm interested in working with you. These public Discord servers work a lot like that. People just making games, asking for help, and making stuff happen. I mean, your friends right next to you could be the next person you make a game with. Max went on to be a very long time friend of mine. I got to work on a game called Tower Duel with him. This was a mobile game that was actually already released. So that was really interesting that my first game was already released. Releasing games, as you might know, is the hardest part about making a game. But this came with some pros and really not cons, but I did make money from it, that's for sure. So from rags to not money, not riches, but it was my first release game. It did let me connect with game devs across the globe. I was in Florida at the time in my undergrad. This was a team all the way in Germany. So I got to work with a German game dev team on a game that was already released, had an active fan base, things like that. And you build long-lasting friendships doing this stuff, just going online and connecting with people. I ended up working with Max again over the years. I even worked with him just this year. And that took us all the way back from 2017 to today. So you never know what can happen. So what's next? You get your first gig or you're working on your first game. Where do you go from there? It's very confusing. You're trying to keep the iron hot, keep things going, but it's very nebulous trying to navigate the game industry, especially nowadays. Well, there's a lot of things that happen. I went to industry events like PAX. I didn't quite make it to GDC yet, but PAX was kind of like the easier one for me to get to. Many of you might know PAX. PAX is really fun. I mean, if you want to just go and enjoy games and have fun, meet other game devs, see what they're doing, PAX is great. It also lets you get around the US, go to cities like Seattle, and kind of just soak in the culture and the industry vibes. I got to do some panels there too, talking with a sound design group called Blip Sounds. I was still uploading music to SoundCloud. Thankfully, it was getting better at this time. And I had what I call a growing collection of bones in the Discord graveyard. This was a lot of dead end projects, things that didn't quite work out or didn't quite release. I tried to kind of recreate what I did with Tower Duel, just keep going on these public Discords, say, hey, I want to work on your game. And, this was a time where a lot of games just sort of fizzled out. Sometimes that will happen. My big piece of advice is there's still something you can learn from that. So keep at it. I wasn't doing nothing, even though I wasn't releasing games all the time. I did learn how to work with teams that were sometimes dysfunctional, sometimes great. I also got hands-on experience with Unity, Unreal Engine, and more. This was really great. If you have time to just mess things up in Unity and Unreal Engine, you can learn a lot about game development. So just download them, hop in, try things out, and you will actually get miles ahead of a lot of people who are trying to do this stuff too. And I did still get to connect with game devs across the globe, working with people just everywhere. Even though we weren't making a bunch of money or releasing games all the time, it was still a really fun thing to do. And it got me out of just, my local area. And yes, I did still make a lot of friends during this time, doing game jams, doing these one-off projects, things like that. This is where you could say my first big break came. I worked on a game called Sirocco. This was a MOBA. As you can imagine, MOBAs are very sweaty genre of games, and a very tough sell for anyone who's playing League of Legends or Dota to switch games. So Sirocco had a very tough path ahead of it. It is live right now, though. And this was a project that was pretty special for a few reasons. So here you can kind of see the humble beginnings of Sirocco. I'll tell the story as it's going on. But Sirocco actually came from Tower Duel. I made that connection where Max from Tower Duel put me in touch with the team at Lunchbox Entertainment working on Sirocco. And guess what? Those SoundCloud tracks, they actually did something. Jack, one of the people who was the founder of this company, he just went on my SoundCloud and heard this track that just seemed to fit what Sirocco was doing. Then we got in touch and started working on this game. This is a game made in Unity. It's a MOBA that takes place in a universe that is kind of submerged in water. So the Earth is kind of like in an apocalyptic future. And you have all these people building these sci-fi and magical boats trying to fight for the last bits of land. So this was a really cool and I think still innovative MOBA. It didn't quite shine as much as we hoped, but I think a lot of the mechanics were really cool. And I think this was also the first time I got paid a lot of money to make music for anything. Just the week before I got in touch with the team, I had updated my website and I put my rates really high. So I got lucky that I thought, it was time for me to charge more industry appropriate rates for music. And what do you know? A week later, I did get the gig. I think the moral of this story for game development is don't count yourself out. Try to just put your best foot forward. No one is here to say you're not a pro. Being a pro is not a matter of skill. It's a matter of mindset and presentation. Anyone can be a professional. Now, if you want to call yourself an expert, that's maybe more an indicator of like, oh, I know everything about this or that. But working on Sirocco is a great experience. You can check out the game, it's still on Steam. But let's get into the music. So the music for Sirocco was really interesting. We focused on a lot of folk instrumentation. This had to do with using like instruments that might be from the cultures that the game's universe was portraying. I think some games do this really well, like Assassin's Creed. They might not make the best games anymore, but they will at least try and represent the cultures that are going on there. Or Ghost of Tsushima and all of its sequels right now, really representing authentic representations of the cultures that games are portraying. So we said, let's do folk instrumentation, let's do no orchestra. So we did end up using orchestra, but in a kind of interesting way, the focus being mainly on those instruments I talked about. And this is really big for the identity of the game, focusing on how does the music relate to the game's universe. This should be music for a changed world. It can't sound like the music you would put on Spotify. It needed to sound like something a bit different that fit for the history of the game's universe. But we still wanted it to hit hard. And so we made it still kind of have this cinematic sound to it. I'll show you a few clips from Sirocco where I played a lot of flute on it. And these are some pretty fun music clips. So when I think of Sirocco, I really think of just leaning into something that was a part of what I did. I was a flute player. I did marching band. I did all this stuff. I had the flute in my hands and the computer right next to me. And I said, hey, let me take what I have and make it a really compelling part of the soundtrack. You can do the same thing. Look at your background, look at the things that you're into, and work it into something really cool that represents you. So let's keep things moving. I also got to work with musicians over the internet. This is Mark Papagine, who does a ton of film covers on YouTube. I got to connect with him and help make the main theme of the soundtrack. This next clip I'm about to show you is actually the demo we recorded when I was in university. We used the studio facilities to make a little demo. I made this with my fiance, Han Hitchin, who is somewhere in here. But this was just kind of where things started before I got to work with Mark. This just shows that even if you're in university, try to look at the facilities around. You can make use of it, maybe do something cool. That ended up turning into the final theme, which was this recorded with Mark Poppy. You can kind of hear a bit of what we had going on there. I didn't get to work with a full orchestra. We weren't throwing huge budgets around, but working with just a few key people really helped bring this thing to life. Let's talk about technical skills. I think this is what really connects with the kind of game dev path I was on. One of the things I was doing a lot was sound design. So creating sound effects for games. This had me get very deep into the engine, doing audio code, sometimes working in engines that we really had no business working in, like things that are in full C++ with no viewport. You can't even see the game. Got to compile everything. Stuff that's really old school. But it did teach me a lot, and there's some really fun things that came out of it. Like this. I got to work on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Hi, I'm Joshua Mallard, lead sound designer on TMNT Splintered Faith. I'm going to show you the process behind one of our most exciting sounds, Leonardo's sword swings. Let's go. The beginning of this journey came with sourcing and recording. This is where we decide what we actually want to use to make our sounds. Kind of like a painter choosing their colors, we choose a few things to record. In this case, Leonardo's sounds are based on steak knives. Take a listen to these recordings. Now that we've chosen on some source material, we can start to combine them in unique ways to make a sound that stands out. We do this in a software called Reaper, which is a digital audio workstation. That's a fancy term for somewhere we can edit our audio, manipulate it, and do all manner of things. Take a listen and see how the magic happens. Now we're at the final step, which is called audio implementation. This can be a little bit mysterious, but it's how we get the sounds to work in the game engine. In this case, we use software like Fmod, which allows us to bridge the gap, so to speak. It's actually a lot like Reaper. We edit our sounds, mix them, and we make them work within the game world. With a little bit of code, you get something like this. I hope you enjoyed. This was one of the most exciting parts of working on TMNT Split. We'll skip that. But, this was a really interesting project. Not only was it TMNT, but there's some really cool things going on in this game. So let's talk about game design and how it connects to the sound design. TMNT was a game where it kind of worked like Hades. You would go through the rooms and you could collect all of these power-ups, these boons. So Leonardo might get a fire sword or be able to shoot lightning out, things like that. This was inherently a big part of the game design and progression system of the game. We needed to make sure that when you got through these rooms, you wouldn't just look more powerful, you would also sound more powerful too. So this really drove a lot of the audio of the game. The game also has a lot of other complex systems, like it's branching narrative. It's kind of doing that whole Hades thing where, hey, as you beat the game, you might uncover new narrative and you got to do more runs. Or if you lose a run, you might learn a tidbit about the lore. So this really drove how we did the sounds. And you can see some of the code there. Actually, not anything too crazy, but we're checking what do you have, and if you have this kind of power up, we might add this VFX or trigger this kind of sound. Let's take a listen to that. So you get the idea. As I'm going through this, new power-ups are triggering all these different sound layers. This actually started as a mobile game, so all of this was super ambitious for a mobile game. But let's keep it moving. This lets us talk about music too, right? I've introduced you to what dynamic audio is through sound design. What's that like through music? Well, usually we think of music as a linear thing. You press play on Kendrick Lamar and it goes through and you hear Kendrick Lamar the same way every single time. Now, in a game, it's different, right? Oh, you're gonna die, so the music needs to change, or maybe your health is low, so we turn up the pressure. Maybe there's a bunch of enemies around you, so you need combat music. We need to change the music on a dime and represent what's going on. So a lot of the same things you might think of with code and with sound design apply to the music as well. Let's look at a few examples. So let's imagine you're in a low intensity combat. You just get a few hand drums like that. Let's ramp up the intensity. Maybe you're in God of War and one of the elite enemies came out or something. Not really a boss, not a mini boss, but maybe a bit more pressure. So this is a great way to introduce unique musical elements. It doesn't always have to be an orchestra. This one used prepared piano, which is like, let's put a bunch of things on a piano and see what sounds it makes. Also some chants and also hand drums. Now let's take this to the next level and get your high intensity. Maybe you're fighting Thor now and the pressure's really on. So I just try to find unique instruments to do this stuff. That was a melodica I think I got for like $15 off of Amazon. It's literally a toy instrument, but you put it in the right context and it turns into this menacing thing. So that's an example of dynamic music. There were some opportunities I had to make it even bigger. Some of my next projects after TMNT, I guess, kind of helped me grow into some bigger things. Maybe I made it to the big leagues. I don't know. In game dev, it can always feel like you're trying to reach for the next project. You never really know what will land on your plate. I didn't know I would end up working on TMNT. I also didn't know I'd work on Tower Duel or Sirocco. These things kind of just happen. But through consistency, you can work on some really cool things. So just keep at it. One of my next projects is coming up here. So this is taken from the trailer of Rebel Moon. This was a sci-fi game or sci-fi movie from Netflix and Zack Snyder. And they said, hey, we want to make a video game. So I never thought I'd work with Netflix. I never thought I'd work on a game like this. It was kind of interesting. Now the movie is quite contentious. So if you look up the movie, it's pretty divisive. But, I think working on a game with Netflix was pretty cool. They're trying really hard to, build up their roster of games. And this was a really fun one. There's some also dynamic music I got to do in this. So listen to the music change as you go through this. So as we've stepped into this higher intensity combat, we've gotten to see new music. And so a lot of these fundamental principles that I learned on earlier games still apply to newer games, even if they have big budgets like Netflix and whatnot. There's also a game I'm working on now, which is quite popular, and that is Dead as Disco from Brain Jar Games. Now, this has been kind of like an indie hit. this is if you want a success story of, hey, an indie game can make it big. This thing is now over 650K wish list. It's now over top 50 on Steam. Next to some really big titles like all these Lego games and highly anticipated games. So this is really a new company that just started something on their own. And you can do the same thing. You never know if what you're doing will pop off. In this case, this game actually really blew up off of TikTok. We showed the rhythm fighting aspect of this game. You can't hear the audio, but there's literally K-pop, hip hop, metal, all this stuff in this game, and you can synchronize to the music. Imagine something like Hi-Fi Rush mixed with Batman combat, and you also have it feel like a whole music video going on. So, hey, there's a lot of unexpected stuff happening. You never know what game you'll work on. If you have a cool idea, put together a demo, throw it online, and you could be an indie success story. We got time for questions, I think. I can't tell, but yeah, if you have any questions, let it rip. Happy to answer anything. Yes. Yeah, feel free to. My website's Joshua Mallard. My email is joshua@joshuamallard.com. I'll send that over so y'all can get in touch. And, that's a good time to say that the game industry, it's not too Hollywood. Feel free to reach out. I'm definitely not too Hollywood. Feel free to reach out to people. Sometimes these connections can really just help. Yeah.
When you started making music, did you rely more on real actual instruments in your hands or more so on VSTs in your DAW?
So I'd say a huge mix of both. I was in band at the time, so I had friends who played instruments, things like that. I played an instrument myself, but I also got started just installing Reaper, the digital audio workstation for free. So I was working with a ton of virtual instruments. Nowadays, projects tend to be a mixture of both, where I might record flute over a virtual production, or like I talked to Mark Popagi and I said, hey, can you record horns and trumpets? And this is true. I mean, actually, Guild Wars did this as well. I didn't know this before a few weeks ago, but Brian Atkinson, the lead composer on the latest Guild Wars expansion, is in Phoenix. He lives in Scottsdale, and he told me that, hey, we didn't get to record full orchestra for the soundtrack. It's a lot of samples. There's some live things mixed in there. And of course, I worked on a Netflix game, and they did not let us do a full orchestra. So times are definitely such that you end up with a mixed bag, but that doesn't mean you get a bad product or anything like that. We make great music still. Yeah.
So if you don't have access to any physical instruments, how do you get like samples and stuff? I tried to get like some sounds for stuff in the past, but like I could only ever find like slop or anything as good was paid. Like,
Yeah. I'll say we're in a golden age of free stuff. I'll send over a list, like a spreadsheet of free virtual instruments. We got so many companies releasing free suites of sounds, orchestral synths, anything like that. For sound design, there's a few options too. I use SoundQ, which is a software for downloading sound effects over the cloud. And so this I use a lot to get sound effects, and they happen to have a free selection as well. So I'll send over a list of some things you can share with everyone. Yeah.
How do you streamline your process in composing? And also, what do you do to take breaks?
Taking breaks is big. There's a time where I was working on 4 games at a time. It was great for some things. I was making a lot of money, but I was so stressed out. I said, hey, let me cut things back and work on less at a time. So really try to find your focus working on things you really like. Work with people you really enjoy. All of that will really help you focus your workflow. As far as composing is like different every time. It feels like you think you got it all figured out, then you sit down and you're doing something completely different. So I think really just kind of get a sense for what helps you, what do you enjoy, and lean on those things while also kind of managing the life around you and what you're working on. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people who didn't really study composition in like school or university, or people that are really kind of getting into it by themselves?
Yeah, I'd say definitely for music and sound design, there's so many great resources just on YouTube. Even though I went and was in band in high school and middle school, no one really taught me how to put together video game music. Hence why I uploaded a lot of really bad music for many years. But YouTube was available then. Now there's more tutorials than ever. You can find people, whether they're trying to sell a course or not, they will give you a lot of information on sound design and music. So the way I got started on both was just going online, looking for advice. I would say something to keep in mind for video game and film music is while music theory is important, it's not everything. There's a lot of different parts to this stuff. So maybe start by thinking about something you really like and try and learn the skills to recreate that thing you really like. I was a kid where everything I heard, I want to go home and try to make that too. I was rapping, I was screaming, I was trying to make pop music, video game music. It was just kind of like an itch. I just kind of like had to try and make something. So I think start with that kind of like recreation mindset.
Well, it's no surprise with his life
Remix,
that that's
which is
very
kind of an
common.
OG thing now, where people were making remixes of Final Fantasy and all these classic scores. And that is where big composers got started. And you can actually see some of that on the forums.
Yeah,
Yeah, let's see. Any other questions?
You have to move
that may
Oh,
or
yeah,
may not
let's
do
look this way.
storm.
Yeah.
non-linear audio mixing. Do you prefer vertical or horizontal?
hmm
Or do you think there's a time and place for either one?
Yeah.
I definitely say a time and place.
Could be a
You
jaw alignment thing
might
too,
want to
if
be
you,
very
you
vertical
know, you're
by
pretty
necessity, right?
lightweight, usually
Maybe
this
you can't
definitely
write
not
the
a-
most music. You can't write a full 60-minute soundtrack. So I might tell developers, okay, let's find some game mechanics we can really build from. Number of enemies or the zone you're in, and let's
Yeah.
change the vertical kind of instrumentation. Vertical means kind of like the example I showed you, where even though it's the same track, we're muting and bringing in other instruments
Yeah.
even though the actual structure of the composition is the same. Horizontal can be so
Sometimes
good
it's
though
just
too.
a time.
I think games like Mario do this very well, where you jump on a zip line and suddenly you're in a new track and then they're back to it. It takes a lot of work to be able to make that all work. But I think it's also something that's powerful. Most
Mhm.
AAA games right now are using a mixture of both, where you'll get, things
That's
that
nice.
take you to new cues, but also scale
So.
down. Yeah,
What's the best way of doing a portfolio?
And she's his,
I think the best way is just kind of
Okay.
doing stuff. When I didn't have any work, I was still uploading to SoundCloud, and SoundCloud became my portfolio. The same thing for sound design. When I didn't have games to work on, I downloaded demo projects and put sounds to them, or I got YouTube videos, muted them, and replaced the sounds. A
Yeah.
portfolio is really everything you want to make out of it.
wow,
That's
that
why
was when
we
you
also
guys were
see
living
people in
together or
the tech
something?
industry doing like GitHub portfolios, going on YouTube, doing projects, stuff like that. So I'd say just have fun, number one, and two, just
Yeah.
go out and do it. It can be sometimes easier than you think. I mentioned the SoundCloud stuff. Some of those tracks just happened in a day, and they
Yeah.
really did help me kind of just show something to people. Yeah, Ryan.
So you've worked on so many cool projects, and I'm wondering, is there a particular project, or it doesn't have to be a project, it could be like a track you wrote?
Well, it sounds like he was wrote for a reason with those kind of people around him.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of the music of Sirocco is like super personal, because it's a lot of my flute playing. Like I was just like in my room, I was in my graduate degree, and I was just, shelling out music. Just took out my flute and did stuff. But Dead as Disco is also something that's just so hype right now. Like we have people ripping
Right.
the soundtrack and getting like 50K views off of a game that's not even released. And there's a lot of music in there that I'm just like, hey, I
Would
think
you
we
choose
might
now?
submit this for Grammy consideration or something. So I think that game will be special. So I think everything
Well,
puts you
unless
in a
there
time
were,
and place. Some of these projects really
he'd
represent
they'd been
different
praying
walks of
for him
life.
because he was in the hospital for
Any other
whatever,
questions?
so.
Yeah, let's go
something
with
like they
that.
would, they might somewhere have like a prayer list for that where something they could search on, but.
Yeah, I'd
I
say
don't know if
it's a
they're up to
big
that now,
mix. I still have Game Dev
Yeah.
League and Reddit has a Discord server instead of the Reddit, I guess, r/game dev, r/indie dev. Basically, there's a lot of those. There's also just scene based Discord servers. Like I'm in the Seattle Game Audio Discord.
I
I don't
have
live in
never had
Seattle, but
them.
there's a lot of cool people in Seattle. There might be a Discord server built around
My
different
mom
pockets
never
of the
made it, so it
industry as
just never
well.
became
There's
part of our
also some
diet,
based on
so when you
engine,
think
like
of it.
engines like the there's
My
an
mother's
Unreal
poison
Engine
as well.
Discord server, and people are just posting like really good stuff on there, technical tutorials, stuff
Yes,
like
but
that.
it's not those kind of things.
So I think there's a lot of stuff you could get into. Also outside of Discord, you can go on like
Yeah.
Eventbrite, things like that, and look up local events. Sometimes even if you can't make the event, there might be a Discord server or a Facebook group associated with the
That
event.
sounds good.
So I think kind of just, it's a choose your own adventure. What makes these good isn't really always the opportunity,
He must be
it's kind
getting
of the
some, right?
exposure. The more you can put yourself around game
Yeah.
developers, the more you will make games yourself. And then it goes full circle. You're like, I'm sick of game developers. Let me go on vacation and do something else and then come back refreshed. Anyone over here or anywhere I didn't see in the back? Yeah.
Kick it over and turn on
I
a
would
sprinkler.
say trying new things, being very experimental, understanding that the world of music that a lot of us know is probably like 1% of the world of music. Sirocco was looking at music all the way in Bali, like music that
You're going to
even
me
though
the
I
fact that
had
I have
a
never
degree in
played
music,
classical
I
in my
had no
life.
understanding of it. And so just being able to say, hey, let me experiment, try something
No,
new, always
it
pushed me
doesn't
to be
smell.
a composer
I don't
that
know
had kind of
why.
a leg up of other
Like,
composers where you might have someone who's a music theory genius, they're doing some like Jacob Collier
yeah, I always
something kind
bag
of
everything
thing.
up tight to feel it before I
But
throw it in. So
they might be boxed in, and they might not even know it. They might only listen to Mozart or Beethoven or
but it
something.
wasn't.
And they never heard Kendrick
Yeah.
Lamar or JPEG
Uh,
Mafia, or they never listened to hyperpop or Balinese gamelan, just
yeah.
be an adventurer with music. How much time we got? We got
Do one more question, and if you guys have any more questions after this, you can come up and ask
Yeah.
yourself.
As a non-composer, what is the best way to learn how to work with composers inside of a team setting?
Yeah, working in a team of composers can definitely be interesting. I think the best thing, like just as far as like what I'd say is the creative puzzle, is trying to really align on what's the big picture, right? Like what is the big we're trying to do? Dead as Zipsco, which I'm working on, one of the
Did
things we
you have
always
a
say is
plan with?
this needs to feel like a music video. I might have my teammate making metal
okay.
music and I might be making hip hop, but we
Oh, that's
still
nice.
have to align on that core idea of, does this feel like you just stepped into a music video? Is this going to pass what we call the playlist test? Could this be something you bump in the
Can you
car?
use Steven's
Things like
song?
that. And then also just not being too, I'll say, sensitive about your creativity. I think
Yeah.
I don't mean that in the way of like, oh, take harsh
You
feedback,
might,
you fix in. I
could they
mean,
transfer the data for
you
his
would
phone
like
to
to
your
see
phone?
your music from a different angle, in a different light. And I think a lot of composers see one path of their music. Sometimes I've worked with people who have shown me a whole different side to my track that I didn't even think about. So I think it's that try new things, but also just kind of think of the big picture, like any creative project, really. You could apply this to game dev or anything else. Yeah. I think we're about at time. Yeah.
We're out of time, but thank you so much.
No problem, no problem.
And then if you have any additional questions, feel free to
Too
come
much
up. But
fun.
other than that, you guys
Life is a
have
juggling act.
get to work. Go. Go.
Get back to work.
Get back to work. Work. Ah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
I love the you presented.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Beautiful.
I'm sure you do. You want to keep her forever. I know that.
A list of free. Fine. My concern, are they like free to use commercially or are they like?
Free to use commercially.
Yes. How